The film begins with a group of men in protective biohazard suits carefully handling an unusual crate. They report to Dr. Julia Goldstein, who watches live footage of a mysterious portal-like opening on the ocean floor with a satisfied grin. Astrobiologist Jim Peters from Miskatonic University is surprised to find Dr. Goldstein in his office. Initially indifferent to her connection with the Pickman Corporation, Jim's curiosity is piqued when he learns about an upcoming expedition. Dr. Goldstein explains their 7-year research in the Antarctic and southern Atlantic Oceans, highlighting a trench on the Antarctic continental shelf and the ocean's deepest point at 37,000 feet. She shows Jim footage of the portal-like opening and reveals the mission's goal: to explore this enigmatic entry and uncover its secrets. Intrigued, Jim agrees to join the expedition. At the briefing, Jim meets his new team: Gordon Atkins, head of the Manned Submersible Lab at London's Royal Society; Christine Harris, a marine biologist from the European Marine Biology Symposium; Joe Meeker, the Safety and Communication Officer; and Hank O'Connell, the Chief Engineer for Providence 3, a deep-diving submersible designed to withstand immense pressure. Christine expresses concerns about the risks, but Dr. Goldstein and Hank reassure her of their preparedness. Suddenly, Jed Pickman interrupts with a passionate speech about the importance of exploring the portal, suggesting it could be their greatest discovery. After the briefing, the team bonds over a meal, discussing the mission's challenges and opportunities. Christine confides in Jim about her anxiety, mentioning her son Sam, and her fear of not returning. 2 months later, the team is ready for the expedition. Pickman decides to join them to witness the portal's secrets firsthand. As they prepare, Jim and Christine descend in the submersible, experiencing a brief shake before stabilizing. Approaching the portal, Christine excitedly points it out to Jim. Their descent to 37,000 feet is successful, and the team is awestruck by the portal's man-made appearance. As Gordon navigates Providence 3 into the portal, a sudden tremor causes the submersible to shut down, cutting off communication with the surface. Christine grows anxious, but the systems restart unexpectedly. Rachel informs them that they've lost contact with the surface for 3 hours, though it feels like only minutes have passed. Hank checks the life support systems, confirming their concern. Before them, an enormous ancient ruin emerges. The team describes the dilapidated stone structures, which appear man-made but are obscured by static interference. The discovery sparks confusion and suspicion, as life at such depths seems improbable. They notice a colossal object on the seabed and are stunned to find what appears to be a life form entombed under centuries of sediment. Dr. Goldstein instructs Jim to collect tissue samples using the rover. As Jim prepares to enter the ocean, Christine expresses her concern, but Jim reassures her. He collects the sample while the team watches. Suddenly, movement is detected on the rover's rear cameras, and their radar picks up a massive life form. Christine instructs Gordon to call Jim back, but Joe argues for the sample's importance. As Jim completes the collection, they lose signal. Fear grips the team as an enormous creature with wings rises and emits an eerie cry. Gordon requests permission to abort, but Dr. Goldstein insists on retrieving the sample. In a panic, Gordon transfers control to Joe, who lowers the submersible to expedite Jim's return. Meanwhile, Pickman encounters an apparition, exclaiming it's a divine encounter. Christine rushes to the pressure dock, instructing Hank to fill it with water for Jim's re-entry. As the creature approaches, Gordon reverses abruptly, causing Christine to fall into the pressure dock. Before Gordon can open the outer doors, Hank warns him to halt to avoid blasting Christine into the ocean. Gordon opens the inner doors instead, and Joe helps pull Christine out. Joe attempts to revive Christine, but she appears unresponsive. Hank finds Pickman on the floor and tries to revive him. Hank checks the flooded bunk rooms and advises Gordon to drop weights before the water pulls them down. Gordon waits 5 seconds before releasing the weights. Hank seals the corridor but cannot close the second door, pleading with Pickman to open it. Pickman, speaking incoherently, watches as Hank drowns. Jim returns to Providence 3 and panics upon seeing Christine's lifeless body. He performs CPR, and after a tense moment, Christine coughs up water. Jim holds her in relief. The submersible exits the ancient ruin and begins its ascent to the surface. As they talk, the pressure dock begins to move. It turns out to be the box containing the tissue sample. Pickman insists that the sample be taken to the lab, but Jim proposes sealing it in the pressure lockout due to its potential danger. Nonetheless, Pickman is adamant about bringing it to the lab. Christine and Jim decide to supervise to ensure the sample remains contained. As they observe, a slimy tentacle emerges from the sample. Jim suggests freezing it, while Christine demands that the lab be sealed. Joe contacts Dr. Goldstein, who warns him that the sample must reach the surface. Dr. Goldstein plans to take the sample for herself, and Joe is complicit in this scheme. Pickman overhears the conversation and, upon hearing this, enters the lab, strips off his clothes, and begins rubbing his body with the sample's slime. Meanwhile, as Jim and Christine are changing, Jim suddenly becomes frantic, revealing that the encounter in the ancient ruin is causing him to hallucinate. Christine holds his face, comforting him until he calms down. As they finish dressing, they hear Gordon scream. They rush to investigate and find the lab in disarray. Christine accidentally touches some of the slime and hurriedly returns to Jim. At that moment, Pickman appears, striking a bizarre pose and emitting an inhuman screech before collapsing into the pressure dock. Christine and Jim attempt to open the pressure dock to rescue him, but Joe intervenes at gunpoint. He reveals that Pickman already knows what they are dealing with. Having spent years researching the ancient ruins before their expedition, their true goal isn't exploration, but obtaining a living organism sample for profit. Christine attempts to reason with Joe, explaining that the organism not only exists physically, but also exerts a peculiar psychological influence on the team. Joe refuses to listen. Meanwhile, Christine and Jim set out to find Gordon. As they approach, they hear Gordon retching. When they find him, they realize he has been affected by the sample, speaking incoherently and gazing at them oddly. Then, in a voice that sounds eerily like Jim's father, Gordon addresses Jim as son. Gordon attacks Jim, who struggles to defend himself before being knocked out. Gordon then wreaks havoc, destroying everything around him, which causes the submersible to malfunction and lose contact with the DP control. Joe, witnessing the destruction caused by Gordon, confronts him. Seeing Gordon's insanity, Joe shoots and kills him. Christine attempts to intervene, but Joe declares that the situation is now about survival. Joe plans to take the rover and leave Christine and Jim behind. However, when Joe turns away, Christine grabs an axe and strikes his hand, causing him to drop the gun, which falls near Jim. Christine fights Joe and ultimately stabs his leg with the axe before rushing to Jim, who has just regained consciousness. Christine opens the pressure dock and boards the rover. However, Jim resolves to destroy it completely, so he takes the gun and heads to the lab. After sticking to his plan and destroying the sample, Jim encounters the apparition that has possessed Pickman. He then hurries back to the pressure dock and tells Christine to leave without him, explaining that one of them must stay behind to seal the pressure dock. Suddenly, Joe appears, wielding the axe. Jim lures Joe away from the pressure dock and shoots him. To his horror, tentacles emerge from Joe's body, and Jim shoots them before hastening back to the pressure dock. Moments later, Jim sees his father's apparition, warning him that the craft will implode upon opening the door and asking Jim to join him. During the last moments of the film, Christine is rescued by Pickman Corporation. Days later, she wakes up in a hospital and confronts Dr. Goldstein about the deaths of her teammates. Christine accuses Pickman Corporation of knowingly sending the team into danger. As Christine speaks, she is suddenly overcome by excruciating pain in her stomach. It dawns on her that she had come into contact with the sample's slime while aboard Providence 3, leading to her possession as well. In a horrifying turn of events, tentacles burst forth from her stomach, enveloping Dr. Goldstein in the contaminated blood as well.